And although it's not quite as currently in the news as when we first chatted about it, I wanted to get some of your take on the whole Steam takeover debacle. So since then, it appears like the summary of the situation was Justin Sun, the Tron guy, bought Steem and with it included a whole bunch of Steem tokens that could be used to essentially make governance decisions because it's a delegated proof of stake system. And then what happened was a bunch of the other Steem community members didn't like the prospect of him being able to do that, particularly since there was some sort of agreement or pledge that those would never be used for governance. Mm-hmm. And so they decided to better safe than sorry and basically try to lock those tokens, which resulted in a brief takeover of all of Steem by not only those, but also colluding exchanges. Just mysteriously, all the exchanges used all the customer funds and just took over the network. And then there's a huge backlash. The network, the exchanges backed off when they started losing customers. And then now it seems to be sort of at a stalemate, or Steem, the original Steem people took back over.
Yeah, it went back to normal, as it should, I think.
Yes, and it seems to be, it's like, system worked as intended. It's great. So Steem's, it's in, but I don't see that, the whole network got taken over by a hostile party for just a few days maybe. But I don't see that as something that's like the system working. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I got a lot of things to say on this front. Number one, the system was taken over by one person, Justin, right? That's really what happened. He managed to convince other people to use the tokens at hand and orchestrate a coup, essentially. So this shows us that these coins that have one key person behind them are absolutely not centralized. Decentralization is a total thing. There's this thing called the Gini coefficient. And what matters is the bottleneck. It doesn't matter if you have this ginormous flask with a giant base of, let's say, miners. And doesn't matter if you have this ginormous flask with a giant body of coin, people who are holding coin. You have a wide coin distribution. Those are wonderful things. If you have one guy and you have one code base and you have that one guy in charge of that one coin base and the future of the coin, then essentially everybody else are his, his people. Let's just put it that way. There's another word that's on my mind, and I think people are getting it, that I don't want to use. So that's really what happened there. And he easily convinced the exchanges to cash in with customer funds. So that's one. I think when people are evaluating platforms, they have to look carefully into, what kind of a thing is behind it? What's the Gini coefficient? Is there only a single client? If so, it's a joke. It's not decentralized. Whoever is in charge of that repo is in charge of the coin. That's one. Two, people will try to pitch this as a failure of DPoS, of delegated proof of stake. I don't see it as such. I see this as primarily a Steem failure. I see it as primarily a Justin Sun kind of an engineered effort. I also see it as, in the long term, there was a big successful recovery. So I see it as a positive thing. The right things did happen eventually. But let's see. There is one intermediate point I wanted to make, which was on the takeover front. It's not a failure of DPoS, but it is a failure of these systems. Okay, why are they? Rather, it's not a failure of proof of stake in general, but it's a failure of this model, this approach, the Steem approach to consensus. Now, what's the Steem approach to consensus? It's this thing called delegated proof of stake. Why is Justin, and in fact, why is Steem rather, doing delegated proof of stake? There's a very simple technical answer for this. It's because the consensus protocol is unable to accommodate more than a handful of participants. They need to winnow down the number of participants, the number of validators, the number of stakers. Every coin in existence today has to do this. Every proof of stake coin has to do this. ETH 2.0, when it comes out, it's going to come out with a design which is essentially identical to EOS. And EOS is essentially identical to Steem that came from the last two came from the same person.
Yeah,
So,
why does this whittling down happen? Why does it need to happen?
well, it has to happen because when you have proof of stake and you have these participants who want to join the protocol, you want to keep down the number of participants. These protocols all require this process called consensus. We have to all agree that Alice gave Bob so many coins, and then Bob gave them to Charlie, and so on and so forth. Those decisions have to be made in a synchronous fashion, in a manner where everybody makes the same decision at the same time. So, and the way the protocols work, it's kind of like running a parliament, if you will, but without somebody in charge. Everybody has to run their own parliament. Now, what the hell does that mean? That means that you, as a participant in these networks, for yourself, have to validate that a decision took place. And I, as a participant, have to validate that a decision took place. Now, how do we do that? Well, in the parliament, the guy in charge takes a big vote and sees how much of a quorum supports the decision. Right? If a hell of a lot of people say yes, then that thing has been passed. Right? So that's really generally how it works. The person taking the poll has to ask everybody, and he has to see if there is a supermajority. Right? You can't just take, let's say, a 51% majority. Why? Because 50% could be honest. 50 or 14, whatever, 50% could be Byzantine, could be messing with you, and that one person, one additional person, can flip the network, can create a safety violation. Or rather, in fact, it's actually worse. I'm sorry, I didn't say that properly. It could be the case that half the people think Alice gave the money to Bob, half the people think Alice gave the money to Charlie, and then one Byzantine guy could convince one set of people that Bob has the money, another set of people that Charlie has the money. That's a safety violation. Now, suddenly you've got two divergent sets of beliefs that cannot be merged together. There's a big problem. So what do you have to do? Well, you have to have a big quorum. How big a quorum? It turns out that you have to seek 67%. Okay, so I have to do my polling, and I have to hear the same answer from 67% of the participants. You have to do the same thing. Every single one of the participants, by themselves and independently, without relying on anybody else, has to do the same polling. So that means that if you have 100 people, you have 100 polls going on, each involving 100 other people, 99 other people. So 100 times 99, do the math, that's about 10,000. Mm-hmm. That's a hell of a lot of messages going around. So imagine that, and how many people would like to participate in the governance, in the management of Steem? I would say no less than 10,000 people. But you can't accommodate all 10,000 because 10,000 people asking 10,000 other people is 10,000 squared, which I think is 100 million messages. So every decision is going to take approximately, I don't know, a couple of minutes, which is not acceptable for any of these systems. So
that's where the delegates come in place?
That's where the delegates come in place. Now you need a delegate. You need to winnow it down so that we don't have 10,000 participants. You got to have a smaller number. How small? About 100 is the practical limit with these protocols that are n squared. So if you look at Facebook's Libra, it's also a protocol in the same family. Facebook's Libra has its goal is to support up to 100 participants. And its current reality is 28 measly participants. It's Zuckerberg and 27 friends. So that's what we're dealing with. All of these proof-of-stake systems that are currently being deployed are pathetic in their decentralization. They cannot scale by design, by their very nature. They're not geared to scale up to large numbers of participants.